So, brethren, it's a pleasure being here once again. I know last week I spoke on proof number two, which touched on that the righteousness of the law and the righteousness of faith are two separate entities. And I gave Philippians chapter 3, 6a and Philippians the same chapter 3, verse 9a as scriptures to be read. Now, today I would like to continue on proof number three, and I'll be speaking on the righteousness of the law and the righteousness of faith can never coexist in the same house in this dispensation of grace. And I'll be reading Galatians chapter 4, verses 22 to 31, and Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 to 18. Now, all scriptures will be read from the King James Version Bible only. So I'll start, brethren. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 11 and verse 17, we read, By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. Against the information given in that verse, I invite you to consider the fact that Abraham fathered 7 other sons by 2 other women, with one of those 7 sons being born some 13 years before Isaac, the son referred to in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17, as Abraham's only begotten son. With the information provided, as I have stated prior, one would be emboldened to ask this question, and I'm asking, how could Isaac be called Abraham's only begotten son when he fathered 8 sons altogether? And my question is, brethren, how could Isaac be called Abraham's only begotten son when he fathered 8 sons altogether? Moreover, how could this be when we know that Ishmael and not Isaac was Abraham's firstborn? So the answer to that paradox is to be found in the fact that although Abraham had 8 sons altogether, 7 of those children were children of the flesh, while Isaac was the sole son of promise, being born from a revived womb by the miraculous intervention of God, when his mother was 90 years old and his father 100 years old. So one can read Romans chapter 4, verse 19, Genesis chapter 17, verse 19 as confirmation. Now, for clarification, brethren and online listeners, the explanation for the paradox of Isaac being referred to in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17, as Abraham's only begotten son, although he had already fathered Ishmael some 13 years before Isaac. With that explanation of that paradox behind us, we also know that in that episode that I just read in Abraham's household, involving, as it did, Sarah and Hagar, Ishmael and Isaac, is the unfolding of the conflict of the law of God and the grace of God abiding in the same house. I repeat, in this Hagar, Sarah, Ishmael, Isaac conflict in Abraham's household, the dynamics of the righteousness of the law and the righteousness of faith are vividly portrayed. Moreover, to ensure that humanity understood the irreconcilable differences between the righteousness of the law and the righteousness of faith, God inspired the Apostle Paul, who details same for us in the following excerpt. So I'm reading Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31, and it states, My little children, of whom I travail in birth again until Christ be formed in you, I desire to be present with you now, and to change my voice, for I stand in doubt of you. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do ye not hear the law? For it is written, that Abraham had 2 sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. With things are an allegory, for these are the 2 covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which generates to bondage, which is Agar, for this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answeret, meaning corresponds, to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with the children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, Rejoice, thou barren that bearest not. Break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For the desolate had many more children than she which had an husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit, even so it is now. Nevertheless, what saith the scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. So that's Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31. Brethren and online listeners, I would like to draw to your attention to the fact that in that episode that I just read from the scriptures in Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31, and as we know the story, the Apostle Paul begins his discourse by lamenting the plight of the Galatian saints, who, after having received God's salvation by grace through faith, apart from the deeds of the law, were subsequently seduced by false brethren into believing that in order to maintain their salvation, it was necessary for them to keep the law, even the old covenant, which was given by God on Mount Sinai. So that's Galatians chapter 4, verses 22 to 25. Now, strangely enough, though, this is a very sad error that our modern day Sabbath keeping friends are advocating today. Brethren and online listeners, since those said spirits that were responsible for that heresy in St. Paul's day are the very ones that are responsible for this modern day Sabbath keeping heresy, it is absolutely necessary that you pay particular attention to what the Spirit of Truth said then and is now saying to this end time church today in Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31 story. Accordingly, in this Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31 story, God has made it abundantly clear that Hagar and Sarah, Abraham's concubine and wife, are the personifications of the two separate covenants under review. The old or first covenant called the law, which he made with Israel, is Hagar, while the second covenant of God's grace, which was made with all the peoples of planet Earth, is Sarah. These two covenants or wills are referred to in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 to 13. And I would like you to please underscore verses 6, 7 to 9, and 13, particularly, if you will, and observe that both covenants cannot be enforced for the New Testament's believer today. Now, before I return to our Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31 passage, it is absolutely necessary to point out that, as far as God is concerned, the first covenant consists of the Ten Commandments. That's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 13, Exodus chapter 34, verse 27, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 9, verse 21, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 7 to 11, and all of the other ordinances which God gave to the Israelites by the hand of Moses. This fact can be verified by reading 2 Chronicles chapter 33, verse 18, and Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1, which tell us that the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary, and that is the tabernacle of Moses, also called the tabernacle of witness, even the tabernacle of Shiloh. So that's Psalm chapter 78, verse 60. Hold 1 second for me, please, brethren. Alright, so I do apologize for stepping away a bit. So from the text that I just mentioned. Therefore, we are absolutely sure that the first covenant referred to in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1, consists of the Ten Commandments, all of the ceremonial ordinances, and all of the other statutes which were given by Moses in Sinai. This fact, Second Chronicles chapter 33, verse 8, Numbers chapter 21, verse 18, Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 29, and Hebrews chapter 9, verses 1 to 5, surely confirms. So, with that clarification in mind, let us together consider this Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31 passage, and observe that whereas Hagar, Abraham's concubine, represents Mount Sinai, even the mountain which the law of first covenant was given, Sarah, on the other hand, represents the heavenly Jerusalem, from which the righteousness of faith, a derivative of the second covenant, even the covenant of grace, emanates. In addition to the facts, we are also informed that Mount Sinai also corresponds to earthly Jerusalem, which is currently in bondage with her children. Galatians chapter 4, verse 25. While the heavenly Jerusalem represented by Sarah is free and as a consequence produces children of freedom or grace, even as Isaac was. I repeat, since the heavenly Jerusalem is represented by Sarah, who produces children of freedom, we New Testament believers are likewise children of freedom, being children of grace. On the other hand, Mount Sinai, which corresponds to earthly Jerusalem, which is in bondage even today, is represented by Hagar, who represents the law and only produces children of bondage. This fact can be easily verified by observing the actual bondage which Abraham's physical descendants are currently experiencing today in Israel. Now, because the children produced by what I just said, respective covenants, it had different natures, which were inherited by Ishmael and Isaac, respectively. God instructed Abraham through Sarah to cast Hagar, meaning the personification of the first covenant, along with her son Ishmael, out of his house. This was so done by God to inform us that the old and new covenants, which produce children with different natures, can never coexist in the same house peacefully. This being the case, it is sheer folly for anyone to attempt to marry the first covenant called the law to the new covenant of the grace of God, for they can never coexist in the same house, neither can their children live peacefully. Being children of different natures, this is what God is endeavoring to communicate to us in Galatians chapter 4, verses 29 to 31, and Hebrews chapter 8, verses 7 to 13, underscoring verses 7, verses 8, verses 9, and 13. Undoubtedly, the following Galatians chapter 4, verse 29 text surely highlights this fact. Galatians chapter 4, verse 29. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit. Even so it is now. So that was Galatians chapter 4, verse 29. Now, what was the solution that God employed then in that original Hagar, Sarah, Ishmael, and Isaac conflict, which existed in Abraham's household? So, my question to you, brethren, is what was the solution that God employed then in that original Hagar, Sarah, Ishmael, and Isaac conflict, which existed in Abraham's household? And what is the appropriate solution today for this law or grace controversy? And the following text spells out God's solution for this ongoing law, grace controversy with which we are plagued today. Nevertheless, what saith the scripture? And the answer is, cast out the bondwoman, which is Hagar, or the old covenant, and her son Ishmael, for the son of the bondwoman, that is, the child of the law of the first covenant, shall not be heir with the son of the free woman, that is, the child of grace. So read Galatians chapter 4, verse 30 for yourselves. So, brethren, as a result of that scripture, divinely given solution, God has also given us the following comforting confirmation. So I'm going to read Galatians chapter 4, verse 31, and it says, so then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, meaning the law, but of the free, even children of grace. So that was Galatians chapter 4, verse 31. From our knowledge gained from that information, therefore, we can now understand why the members of all Sabbath keeping sects are always at variance with the children of grace today. For from Galatians chapter 4, verses 19 to 31, we know that they cannot do otherwise, being religious children of the law of flesh, as is stated in Galatians chapter 4, verse 29. For even as Ishmael persecuted Isaac, that's Galatians chapter 4, verse 29, even so all children of the law will likewise mock and persecute all children of grace. Because of those facts, my dear Sabbath keeping friends, please understand that the options that you have are limited to being either a child of the law of first covenant, or a child of grace, or the last, new, and better covenant. But this no, or religious Sabbath keeping friends, you can never be a child of the law and a child of grace at the same time. The choice is surely yours to make, and to be reminded that God would honor the choice which you make, whether to be a child of the law or a child of God's grace. However, you must never forget that you can never be a child of the law and a child of God's grace at the same time. Without a doubt, what I just shared, those doctrinal findings, are irrefutable biblical evidence that the righteousness of the law, which obedience to the law produces, and the righteousness of faith, which God gives to humanity as a free gift, can never coexist harmoniously in the same house in this dispensation of grace. Of this, I am absolutely sure. And this said conclusion will be the position of all well informed New Testament sons and daughters of God who have also accepted God's position on this issue. So that's the end of my segments today, brethren. I will be live next week again. So, brethren, have a safe and productive week. Remember that Jesus Christ loves you and I love you. So, bye for now. And I do look forward in sharing next week again. So, I do hope that you do spend time revising the scriptures that have been shared and understanding each week the topics that are being imparted upon you. So, bless and God's love you, and I love you too. So, bye.